This is Hannah.
And I'm Ava, and we will be teaching you 9.1 Significance Test, the basics. What is a significance test?
A significance test is a formal procedure for using observed data to decide between two competing claims.
The claims are often statements about a parameter, like the population proportion p or the population mean mu.
To start a significance test, you will need a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis abbreviates to HO, and alternative hypothesis abbreviates to HA.
Can you give me an example, Ava?
Sure! For example, say a baseball player says he can hit 20% of the pitches thrown at him. The null hypothesis would be p equals 0.2, and since we think that this might not be true, that he might actually be hitting less balls than he claims, our alternative hypothesis would be p is less than 0.2. What kind of significance tests are there? The alternative hypothesis is one-sided if it states that the parameter is larger than the null hypothesis value, or if it states that the parameter is smaller than the null value. It is two-sided if it states that the parameter is different from the null hypothesis value. It could be either larger or smaller.
This is expressed in the alternative hypothesis for a one-sided test by using a greater than or less than sign, and for a two-sided test using a does not equal sign.
The alternative hypothesis is one-sided if it states that the parameter is larger than the null hypothesis value, or if it states that the parameter is smaller than the null value. It is two-sided if it states that the parameter is different from the null hypothesis value. It could be either larger or smaller. The null hypothesis HO states the claim that we are seeking evidence against. The probability that measures the strength of the evidence against HO and in favor of HA is called a p-value.
The p-value is a probability assuming that HO is true, that the statistic p hat or x bar would take a value as extreme or more extreme than the one actually observed in the direction specified by HA.
Small p-values equal more evidence against HO, and large p-values equals less evidence against HO.
To determine whether the p-value is small or large, you must set a significance level. The symbol for a significance level is alpha.
A significance level is the p-value amount used to determine whether the evidence is statistically significant in favor of the alternative hypothesis.
In most cases, you will be given the significance level of 0.05.
The point of a significance test is either to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis.
You should never say accept HA or accept HO, because that implies that you believe something is true, while in fact you should only be determining whether something is false.
If the p-value is less than alpha, you reject the null.
Meaning that the probability of this sample occurring is so small that you can reject the null hypothesis.
If the p-value is greater than alpha, you fail to reject the null.
Meaning that the probability of the sample occurring is so large that you cannot reject the null hypothesis. There are two types of errors you can commit while performing a significance test.
Type 1 error is if we reject the null when the null is true.
Type 2 is when we fail to reject the null when HA is true. An example of type 1 error is the wrongful conviction of Hurricane Carter. Carter was a boxer who was in prison for 20 years for a murder he did not commit. In this case, HO would be that Carter was innocent, and HA would be that Carter was guilty. The police committed type 1 error by assuming that he was guilty, therefore rejecting HO when in fact HO was true.
An example of type 2 error is the trial of O.J. Simpson. Simpson was tried for the murder of his ex-wife and her friend. Because O.J. was a famous football player and had a good relationship with the police assumed that he was innocent. In this case, the police committed type 2 error by failing to reject the null when in fact the alternative hypothesis is probably true.
Thank you for watching, and now you've learned all about significance tests. Please comment below using the information given from our presentation whether you believe O.J. Simpson is innocent or guilty. Thank you.